Today, this episode is going to be a little different than most of our episodes because this is the 100th episode of the Arthritis Life Podcast.
Wow.
My mom gets the award for listening to every single one. Yes, and I have my mom and dad here with me today, and we're going to be walking down memory lane, some happy memories, some not so happy memories of my initial diagnosis journey, which happens to be this summer exactly 20 years ago also, which is amazing. And I finally figured this out. I kept saying I was diagnosed at age 20, but it was actually 21. I was already 21 in 2003. I got diagnosed right before my 22nd birthday.
Right.
So yes, for some reason I kept thinking, anyway, because I was, it was so close to my birthday, I had gotten confused. So today we're going to talk about, we're going to go into that story, but first I'll start with just the question I ask everyone in the beginning is just, can you tell me really quickly where you live and what is your relationship, well, your name,
Okay.
and where you live and what is your relationship to arthritis?
My name is Peggy Crow, and I am Cheryl's mom. And my relationship to arthritis is through Cheryl. So I guess that's all I'll say for now. When I first, or I should add, when Cheryl was first diagnosed, I had the same reaction that many, many people do. I just thought, oh, good. Oh, phew. It's just arthritis, you know, because we had spent years and years trying to figure out what was wrong. And like so many of your listeners, I'm sure, have done. And so my relationship to arthritis has broadened as we've learned about what Cheryl's experiencing.
My name is Guy Crow. I'm Cheryl's loving father, and she's an awesome, awesome daughter, and we've had a wonderful life together. I'm Peggy's husband, of course. Okay, I got to admit, when I first heard that Cheryl had arthritis, I thought, wow, well, you know, things could be worse. She could have cancer and a lot of other things. But to be quite honest, I did not understand that she had the difference between normal or just regular arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. I had no clue. I was happily going along and thinking, oh, good, well, Cheryl's going to be fine. She's going to outgrow this little arthritis thing and everything's going to be wonderful. Yeah. And so it's been a real journey and not a particularly pleasant one. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate you both taking the time to chat today. I brought my emotional support dog, Teddy, who is trying to insert himself into the conversation here, which is probably it's a kind of audio recording 101 is not to include your animals, but I couldn't help it.
But, he's too cute.
But yeah, that is it. I think a lot of people listening who have had that experience of people saying, "Oh, it's just arthritis," can feel very minimizing.
Yep.
But at the same time, when you first get diagnosed, if you don't know any better, that's kind of what everyone thinks, you know? Mm-hmm. So I totally get that. And yeah, I mean, I've talked so many times about what a relief it was when I got diagnosed. And we're going to go into that.
Yeah.
We're going to go through all that,
but part of that relief was because I didn't realize how serious it was either. So we were all a little bit the blind leading the blind, as they say. But so just to go back and go a little bit chronologically. So I was, you guys can both attest, a fairly healthy child. I mean, other than a lot of ear infections, right?
Right. Very healthy.
Very healthy.
And very athletic and active and...
Yeah.
And led a very enviable lifestyle. You never drank, you never smoked, you didn't do drugs, or you didn't have time. You were always doing athletics and so... That's important to note as well.
Yeah, it definitely felt like I kind of, quote unquote, did all the right things.
You did.
And then suddenly out of nowhere, my body started breaking down and we were like, what is going on?
Right.
Yeah, and it isn't caused, rheumatoid arthritis, as we know now, it's not necessarily caused by any one lifestyle factor, but you are more likely to have it if you are a smoker, actually.
Oh, I
But
didn't know that.
yeah. But basically, as I've said in the podcast before, but people might be listening for the first time, I graduated high school in the year 2000 and went off to New York from the Seattle area. So I went quite far away for school, but didn't really feel too nervous about that at the time, and joined the soccer team, joined the track and field team, just again continuing the super active, vibrant lifestyle. And then I just started feeling like my stomach stopped working, around my sophomore year. It was like the weirdest thing. I just would eat the same things I was doing, and all of a sudden I was noticing I was like feeling weaker, losing weight, and it started slow at first, right? It wasn't like one day I could eat a full meal and the next day I couldn't, but within a year's time I was really not able to eat very much, and so we started, of course, going to the gastroenterologist. You wouldn't think this is like on the list of symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis and a lot of autoimmune diseases, but it's normally accompanied by a lot of joint pain, which I was not having at the time. So off we went to the gastroenterologist, just thinking maybe I had something in my stomach. They even evaluated me. Do you remember when they looked for if there was a hairball? One of the first procedures I had done was because early satiety, or satiety, however you pronounce it, when you get full really quickly when you're eating, can be caused by something called a bolus in the stomach, and it can be caused by a human or animal hairball in the human stomach. It can happen if people, there's like mental illnesses where people eat their hair, but there's also people who just accidentally, swallow hair from their pet or from themselves. And so when they did the endoscopy, that was actually one of the things they were looking to find. And then we did the barium swallow and all that. And then we kind of got some interesting conversations that I've referenced before with the gastroenterologist, where he kind of implied that, well, these tests don't really show anything is going on. So she must be, what did he tell you? Do you remember?
Well, many things, all of which were really, really revealed a bias on his part. He said, among other things, he said that the problem, he looked at me and he looked at you and he pointed at each of us and he said, the problem is between you two. Your relationship is bringing this on. And, when a doctor says something like that, anything like that to you, you can't help but think, okay, he's a doctor. What's going on? Maybe I'm crazy or maybe there is something to that, but I know there isn't. And he was very judgmental, even at the point that, I don't know if this is going out of order, but even at the point that you finally got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis and we returned to him because you still did have gastro issues. Paresis, he said, oh, I don't believe that. It's not rheumatoid arthritis. Are you sure it's not lupus? And it was his predisposed mind. His mind had been made up. And it's only in hindsight that I realized how inappropriate that was, but there it is. I'm sure a lot of people have experienced that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's so, I've mentioned so many times about how unusually happy my childhood was, how unusually strong my attachment, was, parental attachment, and just, people talk about attachment styles and all that. And I often joke that like, it was like growing up in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Our family is a very happy family. Obviously no one's perfect, but to insinuate that there's some problem between us, that was so bizarre and out of left field. I think what he was trying to say was that we were quote unquote like too close, that a 20-year-old shouldn't be bringing their mom to an appointment.
Yeah. And I remember it was right along those times when they were starting to come out with those milk cartons that had missing children on them. And there was a time, it kind of things that I had not worried about when you guys were tiny. I thought, I better go with my kids to their doctor appointments, even when they get older, because you never know, what kind of crazy stuff might be going on with that doctor. And I didn't realize that. I think I was. And when you went to the chiropractor, I went with you because I was I just, my imagination went crazy thinking, maybe that doctor's some kind of predator.
There are them out. I mean, that's what's happened with, I know the chiropractors when I hurt my knee with soccer, but there are definitely providers who've abused young girls, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true. And yet at the same time, I had 100% confidence in you. It wasn't any reflection on you. I just thought, no, an extra body in there isn't a bad thing. That doctor did not agree with that. I think there were some cultural issues too, possibly, anyway.
Yeah, I think that the way that particular doctor viewed women was kind of, unfortunately, a symptom of what how a lot of women are treated in the healthcare system, across countries, that, women's pain is not taken as seriously.
Right.
And, I remember just thinking it was a no-brainer for me. If you were willing to come with me to the appointment, first of all, I'm still on your insurance.
Right.
So and I'm still financially dependent on you both at that point. You're great. I'm so grateful that you paid my way through college, and I was, it wasn't like I was a completely independent adult. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the dimensions of this diagnosis story that I hope is maybe interesting to some people, because I think there's kind of the realm of juvenile arthritis where you have kids that are diagnosed at, age 3 or 4, and then the parents are obviously heavily involved. And then you get fully formed adults, that are like 35 and had a baby, and then their body wigged out and developed rheumatoid arthritis, and they go through their story. But for me, I'm in that liminal period, that in between, I'm not a child anymore, but I'm also not a totally independent adult. I had never navigated the healthcare system other than annual physicals, just that were required for my sports,
Never.
Yeah, right,
So, or just, I did have some ear infections. I didn't have throat inflammation. I got that cachexia virus in high school, which I had a lot of throat inflammation after that. And they did start me on Prilosec. So I should say, I guess I had one diagnosis for acid reflux and just throat irritation. But it was really not like I had grown up feeling like I was a chronically ill person, or, not at all. So it was weird because it felt like, okay, well, we're going, like, Cheryl, something's wrong with her stomach, obviously. Like, there's a before and there's a now. Yeah. Before, I ate whatever, I worked out, I had my life, my body digested the food. And now there's a now, which is my body's not digesting the food. Right. It's just, I kept saying, it felt like when I was eating, felt like there was a bowling ball, like, in my stomach, and just nothing was going through. And he's just kind of like, we did these tests and you're fine. Like, you're just anxious, or you're hypochondriac. And then he finally did a gastric emptying scan. And so this is all going to lead to rheumatoid arthritis, believe it or not. But the gastric emptying scan diagnosed gastroparesis, which is a disorder of the autonomic nervous system. And that's the part of your nervous system that's like, does the things that you don't think about, like breathing, heart rate, stuff like that. And it also is like, when you swallow food, that's under your control. When you first swallow, you're like, I'm deciding to swallow. And then once you swallow, it's your autonomic nervous system that does those contractions that move the food down. And they're like little electrical contractions. And in my case, I remember specifically they said it was 5 times slower than an average person. And they said that it's normally, there's only 2 known causes of it. It's either long-term uncontrolled diabetes, which I did not have, or a result of like serious long-term eating disorder, like bulimia or something, where you've kind of put your system through a lot and it shuts down. And the rest of the cases are just idiopathic. So I do think, I don't remember if anyone like, they never told me they thought I had an eating disorder, but I do know that was something that, like, I mean, you watch somebody who's like a type A person go from like 130 pounds to 104 pounds. It can't help cross your mind that maybe there was eating disorder, but you guys always believed me.
Right? We always, I'll give your dad a lot of credit, because while he was working this whole time, more than full time, running a business, and I was essentially a stay-at-home mom, I was immersed in the day-to-day, trying to figure out stuff, and it's easy to get overwhelmed with that as a parent, because you want nothing more. The most important thing is for your child to be okay. And there were times when if enough people say to you, not that people literally said to me, maybe she has an eating disorder, but people would suggest things having related to anxiety and so forth. And at one point I just thought, I don't know what's going on. And your dad said, I know Cheryl.
Yeah.
It's emotional for me.
Oh, yeah, no, me too.
Yeah, I mean, I had zero doubt that she had, any kind of eating disorder. I saw her. We did things together. She didn't, she ate like a normal person. She did everything like a normal person. And that's what just, when we went through all these iterations of trying to find out what's wrong with her, I just thought to myself, my God, Cheryl, of all people, who's lived a life, a dream life of goodness, of not doing drugs, no self-destructing of all, and to have these kind of problems and being this young, I just thought there's, we got to get to the bottom of it. I don't care what it takes, but this is something's not right. And I know it's not, I could tell you right off the bat, it's not an eating disorder. It's not, Cheryl has been, I will admit, very close to her mom and dad. That's
true.
I remember as a young girl, even in fourth grade, we'd tell Cheryl and our other children that we were going to go skiing that day. On the Monday, we always.
Oh, right.
I worked on a Saturday and through Tuesday, and so we had Sunday and Mondays off, and we'd tell the kids that we're going to go skiing. And Cheryl, I could just tell, she really didn't want us to go skiing. She was kind of afraid that we might get hurt, and the other two kids could care less.
I remember, I do think that, with all the therapy I've done for anxiety now, I can look back and see some of the signs of maybe a bit of, I was just very, very safety aware and and that obviously that's the problem with anxiety. Anxiety is very helpful and adaptive in many cases, right? Like anxiety about maybe I should put my seatbelt on in the car is obviously helpful, right? But if it's, who gets to decide where we draw the line? But if I don't know.
Cheryl was always the most hyper aware of everything around her.
Yeah.
And it just, so it did not surprise me that she would get a little anxious when, we do something like that, because she's always thought ahead.
Yeah, and to relate it to the, physical health issues, it felt so frustrating to me to be have multiple doctors insinuate that I was just anxious, because I'm like, I literally had anxieties about various things, about my nickname on the soccer team was Mom, because I was always I watched those educational videos in middle school and high school worked on me, where they'd say, people who drink too much alcohol can die of their own choking on their vomit, and so I wouldn't go home until I knew everyone on the team was safe, things like that. That's what I was anxious about. I wasn't anxious about my health like most people who are 19, 20.
Yeah,
I just took my health for granted. Obviously, I eat well, I exercise, I'm going to be fine. It's that false premise that a lot of people operate on. So what felt frustrating is to be if this is a chicken or egg problem, clearly the first one, I guess we don't know if it's chicken or egg, the first thing that happened was my health issues happened, and then I got anxious about them. It was not that I was anxious. I never spent a second of my life considering, am I going to digest my food today? Am I, it's my body just does it. And so that was what was so frustrating. And we ended up, so back to you, but that you said, both of you said that you were you got to the point where, you had to consider all possibilities,
Right.
but you definitely trusted in, like, I would tell you, like, I wish when I went and I studied abroad in Australia in 2003, the year I got diagnosed, I
Right.
studied in Australia from January to March or April, and I wasn't feeling good, but we kind of had these discussions beforehand. I mean, I'm going to either feel crappy in New York or feel crappy in Australia, but it's like been a lifelong dream to study abroad. So, but when it was either, we can't remember because we don't have all the records, but it was either right before I went to Australia or right when I got back that you hired the concierge doctor.
Right.
And that was a really good idea. In retrospect, obviously.
It was
It was the only thing
it was
we
a
could-
new concept
Yes,
back then.
that's right.
It happened to be our regular. Well, I don't want to identify anybody, but it was within the clinic that we were already going to, and some of the people left to join the concierge portion of that same overall
system.
Umbrella, and so it was a fairly seamless transition. You
Yeah,
know.
it was, and I've mentioned it before, we had the financial privilege to be able to do that, but it wasn't just
absolutely.
like that you had endless money, so you had to decide, like,
We just joined for you. We could have joined as a family, but frankly, nobody else really needed it, and it was more economical just to go one person at a time, and even that took a little while. It wasn't a magic, immediate diagnosis.
no, it wasn't like Dr. House.
Yeah,
I mean,
Oh my.
I mean, but the first thing she said to me was she's one conversation I remember specifically where I wanted to be a good little patient,
Right.
and I brought her because, again, I had this diagnosis now of gastroparesis, but something else was wrong. I had this sprained finger, and I didn't know what it was. I had this sprained finger, which was so low on my priority list that it didn't even make it into any of the appointments, but until all my joints started hurting. So I had this one joint, the finger. And I, told her, look, I got this diagnosis of gastroparesis. There's not that much you can do for it anyway, but I'm doing the gastroparesis diet. I'm taking the random stuff that the gastroenterologist said. And like, it's still not, like, I'm just wasting away. My muscles were going away. And I brought her a little food diary I had made. I don't like thinking about food that much, honestly. I just want to I like baking and eating sweets and sugary food and stuff, but I don't want to, I've never been the kind of person that's been like, oh, I want to go on a vegan diet or I just am like, it's exhausting to me. So but I guess the way I presented to her was like, she literally just said, now, what do you think it means that you kept this journal?
Yeah.
Remember that? She was like, what do you think it means? And I was like, it means that, like, I care about my health and I'm trying to feel better. Like, I wish that's what I had said. That's what I felt.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't know. And she's like, I think it means that you're, like, hyper fixating on your health. So she first went down the road of health anxiety too.
Wow.
The concierge doctor. And she prescribed me Lexapro. And at that point, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I am pretty freaking anxious, people, because no one is figuring out my health issues. But I had started to legitimately develop, it's like this tragic thing where I had started to develop panic attacks. So that is legitimately, anxiety disorder territory. But it felt, again, so frustrating because I was like, I never had panic attacks before this started happening.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it was a matter of maybe 3 months or so. It wasn't an extended amount of time until she put the pieces together, based on thanks to your input. And at that point, it became really, really helpful to be part of the concierge because she put you literally that day to the rheumatologist she referred you to.
Wow.
And they had they prescribed the methotrexate right away. I mean, it was right away. And then I think it was maybe a month later or two. My first reaction, however, was, I don't know if this is out of order.
Well, let's just really quick for the record. I have said this before, but again, some people might just be listening to this episode, that I did wake up one morning in July of 2003, it was either late June or early July, with every single joint hurting. So it wasn't just the sprained finger. And I was like, okay, this is new. This is a new symptom. And we reported that to the concierge doctor. And that's when she was like, And what I remember specifically what frustrated me is that previously I had been told by her and the gastroenterologist, well, we ran all the blood work and everything's normal.
Well,
and
they
then
didn't
she's
run
like,
that blood work.
Yeah. So then she's like, well, okay, I'm going to run more blood work. I was like, well, then why did you tell me before you ran all the blood work? Yeah. You didn't run all the blood work if there was more blood work to be run.
Yes.
But okay, I'm the anxious one. No, just kidding. Obviously, I feel defensive about that.
Yeah.
But so then,
and you should be.
It is, for the record, bilateral inflammation and pain of the small joints of the fingers and toes. That is the cardinal symptom of rheumatoid arthritis. So it's not it's hard to say whether they should have been able to put the pieces together earlier. What I just wish what had not happened is that they had made the conclusion that I must be just over anxious.
Yeah.
Without ruling everything else out.
Yeah.
And it just breaks my heart thinking of all the people out there that are probably still being told that may have an autoimmune disorder or something else. But I mean, obviously, autoimmune disorders are just notoriously hard to figure out for many, many people.
I really think the default, and that's part of why I do share these patient stories on the podcast. And, the default state should be to believe patients, and to say, sure, if you're feeling a lot of, discomfort. I was feeling a lot of pain. It wasn't joint pain. I was feeling stomach pain all the time. If you're feeling discomfort, if you're feeling, like scared about the fact that you don't have any answers, that's a normal human response. Like, let's give people, if they had presented it to me, like, I want you to try these anxiety meds and like maybe go to therapy because this is a lot for you to go through right now.
Right.
That would have been a lot different than saying, I think nothing's wrong with you. That's the gaslighting. Nothing's wrong with you because we did the tests and nothing's wrong.
Right.
Okay. You didn't do all the tests, first of all.
Right.
And so.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction.
But so then we got, so all my joints were hurting and we're like, okay, this is weird. And then the doctor at the time
did the blood work.
Yeah. And all I remember from that conversation, when she told me she thought it was rheumatoid arthritis and she's going to send me to the rheumatologist. I'm like, what's that word? Who to what a dist?
I did the same thing. Yeah.
But I was like, I remember thinking her face is really serious. Like, why is she acting like this is such a big deal?
Yeah.
And it wasn't just that I thought arthritis wasn't a big deal. It was that I'm like, do you understand? You're telling me I was right this whole time. Like, do you, where's the moment when I get to say I was right? I was like, why are you looking like this is such a sad thing? Like, me being like a know-it-all, I'm like, I told you. But what were you guys feeling at that moment when we finally had an answer?
Oh,
well,
my God.
You want to go?
I mean, finally, and after so long of all these appointments and all this kind of up and down that Cheryl had to go through of going to see these people and thinking that they're really going to help you. And then, they come up with things that we know, we literally know just aren't true, or aren't really the source of this thing. And to find a source to say, oh, okay, well, now we could work on it. Now we could understand it. And of course, I don't think either one of us knew.
I didn't know. I remember the nurse who showed you how to inject yourself at the point that you had Enbrel. She said, I was like, can't we just put this off? She's going to be a captain of her soccer team. It's her senior year. This stuff has side effects. Oh, yuck. It's just arthritis. I mean, I'm ashamed to say now how ignorant I was. And she looked at me and she said, there are people that prior to this medicine being available, they couldn't walk, and they took this medicine and they got up and walked out of bed. And so, it's a huge step forward to be able to take this, and don't wait a year,
I remember, I don't remember that conversation. I just remember being like, I felt like I was just desperate to just take anything, like literally inject me with whatever. Like, I have claustrophobia and claustrophobia, which is fear of being trapped, but I never had a needle phobia. So I was just like, sure, here, arms, legs, wherever, put it in me, get me better, you know. But I don't remember the conversations, or I think you remember, I remember you said that you asked them, you said, can she wait a year? And they said also that there's people where they're at the blood work and the numbers that I had of my inflammation.
Yeah.
They said if we, in 1 year, she could be in a wheelchair.
Right.
You know, and that's, and this, I've said on the record many times that being in a wheelchair is not the worst fate that you can have by any means.
No.
It's just, you have an option in the beginning.
Well, it's not going to get, I mean, I think the deal is it's not going to get any better. You know, this diagnosis is a serious one, and the sooner the better. And thank God there was something they could do. I mean, I just, scares me to think.
She said if there was ever a good time to get it, it would be now that these biologics are available.
Yes.
And I've heard you mention this on your podcast several times. You know, people tend to focus, I don't know why, on the side effects rather than the reality. If you don't take anything, it's not benign, you know, and so.
And they also they have to weigh the side effects versus the benefits of the medication if it works as intended, you know, and so we were very lucky that I went. So it's hard, it's a confounding variable that I started the anxiety meds a couple of months before, because now we know there's like a axis between the gut and the brain, and that anxiety, like a lot of your serotonin, which I was on an SSRI, a lot of your serotonin is processed in your gut. But between the treatment for rheumatoid arthritis and the treatment for the anxiety, I completely, I mean, you wouldn't expect that the anxiety meds would help my rheumatoid arthritis, but you would expect they would help my stomach. Now there's a known relationship between those. So between getting the rheumatoid arthritis flare up under control and the anxiety meds, I put all the weight I had lost back on. And I was like, woohoo! Like, I got my life back, you know? And went into...
absolutely.
I mean, you were, what I was told was that your numbers, your rheumatoid factor in your blood were so high that they didn't even chart that high. So we don't even know how high they were. They were literally off the charts.
Off the charts, how they measure it. And it's such a double-edged sword, right? Because then we're feeling like we have this relief or this direction to go, but then also, oh wait, this is an autoimmune thing. We were just talking about that you felt, Dad, that like there was not going to be any more of this malarkey, meaning the doctors insinuating that I must be making it up.
Exactly. And I lost my faith in doctors quite a bit. I just kept, you know, hearing these things when Cheryl you'd tell me, you took Cheryl here, they said this, and I said, whoa, this is not right at all. And fortunately, we had the wherewithal, and you had the time, and Cheryl was willing to just keep at it. Just don't stop, because it's just not right. It's not right to have a 21-year-old, a 22-year-old that is, you know, losing the kind of weight you were losing, and something is drastically wrong. And we got to find out what it is. And we did, and thank God. Thank God that, you know, that we did what we did, and we had the wherewithal to do it, and at least we got a diagnosis, and now we could get on with trying to live with and what.
You know, we live in an area of the world that has excellent medical care. Really excellent access, I should say, to medical care. I just feel for the people that have to drive hours and hours, or maybe even fly if they're in really remote areas. It just requires so much time and energy in most cases.
And access to insurance. I mean, many things. So many things. And just for the record, for people who might want to understand how weight loss is related to rheumatoid arthritis. So yes, I did have gastroparesis, which can cause weight loss, but also uncontrolled rheumatoid arthritis causes something called rheumatoid cachexia or cachexia, however you want to pronounce it. And that is a direct result of rheumatoid arthritis, like inflammation affecting the muscles. So it causes muscle wasting. So that's what I experienced. Wow.
Yeah, you kept saying you're so weak.
I just was so bizarre. I still can't quite even believe this all happened to me. And I think was such a mind shift for us all to go through is, I think, in our family, we tend to be like, maybe this is more me, but kind of trusting of professionals, right? You hire a professional and they do their professional job. Sure. And I'm not saying the doctors were like failing utterly, like no one is perfect, but it was such a bizarre, I would never be like, well, they must be wrong because like they're the doctor. Yeah. It was just but I'm like, but I knew that something was wrong. So it was it was like impossible to hold these two different ideas at the same time, that I know my body. I know this didn't come out of nowhere. And then they're saying, they're the expert and they're saying nothing's wrong. Right. We did your blood work. Nothing's wrong. So must be in your head. And it's like, okay, but I know it's like, and now we know to advocate. We know to get second opinions. So it's like, we didn't have that experience to know that. If it hadn't been that the concierge, it wasn't even like you looked out for a concierge doctor. It was more that the doctor left to become a concierge. I mean, and for those who don't know, concierge is kind of like, it's like you pay more. This is a thing in the United States, and then they're kind of available quickly for you, like 24/7. Right. It depends on the plan.
And the doctor who left to go to concierge that you followed. She wrote a really, really well-written letter explaining why she was doing it. She said, I went to medical school. My goal is to practice good medicine. And I can't do that when I have 2,000 patients. And if I go to concierge, I don't remember the numbers, but something like this, then I'll only have 200 patients and I can, so I can see why doctors would go to that, but it is obviously excluding a lot of people that can't pay for it. So anyway.
Yeah, we're just very lucky. And I'm going to ask you for your best advice for maybe other parents right now going through this period. But first, the diagnosis saga. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Mom, is back to that initial, after the diagnosis, when they started telling us about the treatments, and you told me before we started recording that that it was a bit of a humbling experience for you when they told you that no, you can't really delay this treatment. Can you say more about that?
It was very humbling because you're at that point, especially when your child is sort of changing from living at home and they're off to college. They're launching themselves into their own life, and your role as a mom or dad is changing. And I wanted to at the same time feel like for the first few years anyway, it was like everything depended on me, and I educated myself and I did research and tried to figure out why were you getting the ear infections, for example, and that kind of thing. And when I was a baby, I thought whenever there were problems, I could solve them somehow, or at least put you through to whoever could solve them. And it was just really a big transition to realize I would love to be able to go on the computer or read or talk to enough people and solve rheumatoid arthritis, for my daughter, but I can't. And I just am putting you in the hands of hopefully really capable professionals, and that's a big leap for most parents to do. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it totally does. And I think it's even a harder thing now in a way in 2023 versus 2003, because it's hard for people to remember, but the internet, it wasn't as robust. There weren't all these different websites like Arthritis Foundation and stuff. It was just kind of like WebMD and things, really hardly anything. So it's like another paradox where you have access to so much more information, but you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. And you have to sometimes be like, okay, the patients are the experts in their own care, and like, quote unquote, I was right about a lot of things to do with that I was sick, but then I had to say, okay, well, I'm not an expert in rheumatoid arthritis.
Right.
I just learned about this diagnosis, you know, so yeah.
And it is manifested in so many different ways, and there are so many different potential approaches to treating it, and it's just a lot of adjusting. I remember when I wanted you to take airborne before a flight because it increases your immune system, and then somebody suggested, you know, maybe you don't want to increase your immune system because your immune system is already overactive. And I don't even know if that applied to airborne, but it was just that whole mental autoimmune things are kind of, for me at the time anyway, counterintuitive.
Right.
Yes.
Because you think, oh, everybody wants a better immune system.
Right.
And so there are just a lot of transitions, a lot of adjustments as a parent. And you had a great attitude. You made it easy for me, but it just you said it was, you know, it's a lot of adjusting.
Yeah, was it hard to send me back to Vassar in August of 2003 because it was so new? The diagnosis was so new.
You know, I feel like it should have felt hard, but I just never worried about you that way. You were always a leader. You were always take charge. You had a great attitude. I felt like you, and you weren't going off. I mean, you were going to an area in which there were medical people, and you were still in college. I mean, a lot of your life was still, kind of made a little bit easier for you, than when you're truly on your own. I didn't worry too much. I know we talked and emailed all the time, so.
Oh yeah, we have stacks of printed out emails.
I
wish I could access some of those, or I wish I had accessed those before, but it's too much to go through. Too much, literally, just a lot of reading. And so and just to tie up that first, this is kind of like, this is the diagnosis story and kind of phase one of my journey, which is that we reached the pinnacle of the mountain, which was getting a diagnosis. Right. We got good treatment, the treatment worked, and we came down the mountain and we're like, done. We summited that, we're done. Yeah. And that's kind of what I thought my life would be for the next 60 years. Yeah. Would be just stay on the medications. Yeah. And then there is a chapter 2. Hey, we're leaving them with a little bit of a, cliffhanger. But I mean, chapter 2, spoiler alert, it gets more complicated because the medicines your body doesn't always respond to the medicine forever, unfortunately. I have a friend who's been on Enbrel for 14 years right now, though, and that's her journey. And it's just, for me, it worked for 6 years, and then my body created antibodies to it. Yeah. But so this is not to say that it was all sunshine and rainbows afterwards forever, but it was kind of sunshine and rainbows. Right. Kind of remember coming back and people were like, how are you feeling? I know your health was like really bad for a while. Oh, it's great now.
Yeah.
It's great. I got the treatment. I went off the anxiety med after a while because it was just like, oh, I guess I don't think I need this anymore because I'm feeling, my anxiety was about my health legitimately. And then I got my health figured out. So bye-bye. Yeah. But then that also reared its head again later. Anyway, I'm talking too much. But I was going to say, if you have any words of wisdom or encouragement, do you have any words of wisdom or encouragement or advice for parents who, or in your case, whether their child is 2 years old or 20 or 40 years old, parents who are kind of in the role of advocate like you were for me when their child seems like they're really sick and they're not getting any helpful treatment by the medical system or that they don't have a diagnosis yet. Yeah. What would you say to them?
Well, I guess the most obvious thing is just don't give up and really don't apologize for your persistence. So much of that is so obvious in hindsight that I wish I'd been more aggressive and on your behalf. And so definitely don't give up. And I don't know if this is advice or just sort of acknowledging how fortunate we were, but it really helps if there's two parents involved because, sometimes your dad would have been immersed in other stuff all day. And when I tell him what happened and we were all just kind of going around in these circles, he would say, wait a minute, that's not, like I said earlier, that's not Cheryl, don't fall for that. Go, keep at it, find a different doctor, whatever. So it really does help if there are two parents or two advocates in the child's life or more that can keep that perspective. It's easy to get bogged down. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think you have been, both of you, but I think especially Mom is a good role model to me of not being too much of a people pleaser. I guess I should say you've called me out at times on being too much of a people pleaser. You've helped me learn to advocate for myself, because my default is I don't want to make waves.
Right.
Like I have learned at 41 years old, I'm a lot more assertive. But when I was younger, I definitely was very like a deferential to authority. Yeah. And I felt self-confidence. I know that I'm smart. I know that I'm a good person. But I would also be like, oh, well, that's what the experts said. So
me too.
And so I think you've helped me, because again, it's just so not. I know now there's a lot more, I think, of awareness about like patient self-advocacy and stuff, but back then it was I didn't think it was very polite, you know?
No, I know. I think I will agree that I helped you with advocacy, but I think I also was weak in that area when I've applied to medical stuff, because I really just didn't know enough. But I do think it applies across the board, whether it's medical or any other aspect of life. Advocate for yourself. Don't apologize, especially as females. We're socialized to, certainly in my generation, to be responsible for other people's feelings. Yeah. And
it's like no one wants to feel sick. Like no one wants to, feel, and I tried one year. I don't know if I ever told you this. This was a few years ago. My New Year's resolution was to not apologize in my medical appointments, just because I was like, I didn't, even if I did do this to myself, okay, people make mistakes. Like I don't want to waste any of the time in the medical provider encounter apologizing unless I actually did something to them, which is not the case. You have to be a fierce advocate. Yeah. Last question I like to usually end with is, what words of wisdom or encouragement would you say to somebody newly diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis?
I would say get as much information as you can, however you can. Obviously, Cheryl's program is a good example of that. And don't be afraid to ask all the questions that you can, and don't be afraid of medicine. Look at all the ramifications and not just the side effects, and talk to people who have been down that road. That's my advice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know this is a lot of like kind of a mixed bag of like painful memories to look back on. I mean, it really is weird that it's half my lifetime ago. But it's also obviously some good memories. And I do want to end by just saying how grateful I am to have had, you both as advocates and as people who believed me, believed that there was something else going on, not just because I said it, but just because, like Dad said earlier, because you knew that I was this, there had to be some explanation. Yeah. So it just makes me, the older I get, the more I realize how lucky I've been to have such a solid, like, family support. And when I run the Room to Thrive support groups, like a frequent topic of conversation that a lot of people struggle with is their family not believing them.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and it's so heartbreaking. They'll, and it's like, those are the first people who should believe you.
Yes,
they'll say, well, the family's like, well, whether it's someone's own child that doesn't believe them, like an adult child, or their parents or siblings or close friends or coworkers. I mean, just the experience of not being believed is really deeply, deeply, traumatic to many people, and myself included. I think I'm very sensitive to it now because of what I went through, healthcare wise. But I've never had to worry about being believed by, by family. So
Yeah.
Yay.
Oh, yeah.
yay.
Yay is right.
Well, thank you again. I know that this is definitely a different thing that you're not used to being on the other side of the microphone. So I really, really appreciate it. And I usually also end by saying where people can find you on social media, but you both are not really on social media, so we're not going to worry about that. But if those people who are just listening and not watching, you can always check out the Arthritis Life website to see a transcript and a link to the video and a link to the show notes. And I will also link in the show notes on the episode page to some additional reading about people who've been in a similar situation, like that Brain on Fire book about the woman who had people were saying she was a hypochondriac, and it turns out she had, what was it that she had?
Something autoimmune.
Oh yeah, she had autoimmune.
Yeah.
And there's so many good books and articles on this topic. So if you're in the undiagnosed territory, you're not alone. So thank you so much again, and we'll say bye-bye for now.
Okay.
Bye.